Hello friends, today we're going to discuss a topic that's interesting, profound, and I would say instructive. Let's talk about the current relationship between Poland and Ukraine, or more precisely, about how political maneuvering for power, economic competition, and ghosts of the past have intertwined into one tight, rather unpleasant knot. We'll discuss everything now, including Polish and Ukrainian politics. Please like and subscribe. Thanks so much for your support, friends. You know what to do, so let's get straight to the point. And we're moving on without any ads. There's a real storm brewing in the Polish and Ukrainian information space. It's non-stop all the time. Newspapers are full of headlines about a new wave of discord. Politicians on both sides are loudly hurling, excuse my language, accusations, while ordinary citizens are facing a sharply colder social climate. Let's, friends, as people who are used to getting to the heart of the matter, blow away this froth of emotions and lay out the facts clearly. Let's see how this system actually works. Especially since my subscriber, Uncle Vova from the city of Bielsko-Biała, has been asking me for a long time, saying, Dencik, make a video about Polish politics. What's really going on here? For those who don't really understand, who are the right wing? Who are the left wing? Who are the centrists? Well, let's go. The first part of our ballet is the pre-election political card game. And actually, to understand why the topic of historical grievances and migrants has flared up with new force right now, you need to take a look at the Polish political scene. And there is a fierce struggle for the seat, for power, and for control over the state apparatus. On one side, we have the ruling coalition led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, which includes the Civic Platform, the Left, and the Third Way. On the other side, there is the National Conservative Opposition, represented by the Law and Justice Party of the legendary Jarosław Kaczyński, plus the newly elected president. President Karol Nawrocki has already marked his anniversary in office. And in addition, the far-right Confederation bloc is rapidly gaining strength. And here, the polls give the ruling liberals with some very unpleasant math. Tusk's ruling bloc is holding on, well, let's be honest, by a thread. Its minor centrist and leftist allies are barely hovering above the 5% threshold. Yes, you might be thinking right now, my God, there is still a year until the elections. Just look at the calendar. Yes, there is a year left, but I'll tell you, the fight is already very serious. As they say, get ready ahead of time. So if the left loses 0.5%, that's it, it's over, the coalition falls apart. At the same time, the opposition, represented by PiS and the two confederations, together get a solid majority. And Ukrainians will be very unlucky if these guys find common ground. How do you win over the electorate in such conditions? The answer is as old as the world. You need to find a clear, emotionally charged topic that can boost your ratings without much effort. And once again, that topic has become Ukraine. Political strategists from Law and Justice remember the spring of 2015 very well. And I'll tell you, when I arrived back then, honestly, I didn't really understand Polish politics. I've only just started to understand what's what, more or less in the past year. Back then, in 2015, when I was a handsome 27-year-old who came to sunny Poland, President Bronisław Komorowski was confidently leading in all the polls. But as soon as he spoke in the Verkhovna Rada, and for some reason, the Ukrainian deputies voted the same day to glorify the UPA, his opponent from PiS, Andrzej Duda, instantly rode that wave. There were very loud statements that this was a slap in the face to Poland. And Andrzej Duda, a completely unknown press secretary from PiS, won the presidential election in Poland. Can you imagine? Today, the opposition is trying to pull off exactly the same trick. And we have to admit, the Kyiv authorities themselves are giving them perfect reasons for this. Let's remember the assigning of UPA-linked names to units in the Ukrainian armed forces. Or, for example, the very tough dialogue about the exhumation of victims of the Volyn tragedy, especially when Polish society is extremely sensitive to this topic. I don't know if this is colossal political blindness or just a bluff, a desperate bluff, probably from the position of, God, we're at war, leave us alone, who do you think you are, how dare you? And yet they go ahead and allow themselves to do it. So it's unclear what this really is. In the end, Tusk ends up as a hostage. If he shows even a drop of flexibility toward Kyiv on any issue, the far-right and PiS will immediately declare him a traitor to national interests. And the ruling party is forced to adopt a tough, ultimatum-like rhetoric themselves just so they don't get eaten alive in the elections. Are you betraying our national interests here? The second act of this ballet, my friends, is the economic subtext and the depleted reserves of empathy. It would be a grave mistake to think that it's all just about political tactics and historical memory. History is just a convenient wrapper. Underneath it, there are always very real material interests. When millions of refugees poured into Poland in 2022, yes, about 1 million of them stayed, maybe even less, around 700,000, the Polish society extended an enormous amount of trust and empathy. But any emotional impulse inevitably faces a threat, the harsh reality of everyday life. Because there are things like market competition. Poland is a developed agricultural country and logistics hub. Polish capital sees Ukraine not as a weak neighbor, but as a giant, dangerous competitor in the European market, with cheap grain, poultry, and trucking. Small and medium-sized Polish businesses simply can't withstand such competition and are starting to demand protection from their government. And there's also a struggle for resources, for social resources, because the average Polish citizen increasingly resents, whether real or imagined, things like certain benefits or access to healthcare and education for some mothers. In a situation of inflation and rising prices, the typical old lady from the neighboring building starts to wonder, is it justified or not? Well, you decide for yourselves. She says, oh, why are my taxes supporting those who arrive in expensive cars and don't show us any respect? Well, she's just repeating right-wing rhetoric. And there isn't really much sense in it. But nevertheless, madam, and I can tell you there are a lot of such ladies and gentlemen. Because let me tell you, critical thinking doesn't really work well at a young age. And it doesn't work well at an older age either. And basically there's a demand for reciprocity. The position being, you owe us because we protect you. It doesn't really work in Polish society. Because the Poles say, excuse me, if we hadn't given you some weapons in 2022, you would have fallen. Your society, your country, your army, they simply wouldn't exist anymore, you understand? So we saved you. For Ukrainians, of course, the situation looks different. Polish elites and ordinary citizens are demanding some basic reciprocity, right? If we give you a transit hub, weapons, money, then come on, respect our historical wounds, let's have these exhumations and so on, although the exhumations are happening. And as a result, the public sympathy has completely run out. According to polls, almost 60% of Poles are against Ukraine joining the EU. And the third openly admit that their personal attitude toward Ukrainians has changed for the worse. Well, now we move on to the third part of our ballet, the everyday level. From conversations on the streets to a boiling cauldron. So let's see how all this big politics, which I tried to explain to you in 7 minutes, yes, spills over into the most ordinary everyday level. And it spills over in a rather unpleasant way. From TV screens, from every outlet, every day we talk about ingratitude, volhynia, exhumation, competition for jobs. They say they're taking our bread, living on welfare, and at the same time taking our jobs. And the street atmosphere changes very quickly. Anti-Ukrainian rhetoric from social networks instantly spills over into trams, courtyards, and parks. And we see how casual xenophobia is becoming the norm, right? Because, well, how many examples are there when someone, drunk or not, causes a scene just after hearing a similar accent? Just after hearing it. Obviously, none of the Ukrainians walk around with red and black flags, right? And they don't sing Batko nasz Bandera. But still, it's enough just to hear it, and the rage is already boiling up. Because people get shushed, yeah, when they're talking on the phone. Kids on playgrounds start getting chased away from their peers just because they speak with an accent. This is unfortunately a natural or unnatural consequence. Write your thoughts in the comments. But nevertheless, it's the result when political elites, in order to gather electoral support, deliberately start stirring up the national question. The average person, the typical Kowalski, doesn't get into the nuances of pre-election coalitions. He picks up on the general message. It's okay to mistreat these people. Nothing will happen to me for it. Well, they might detain me, but they'll let me go, and that's it. Human rights activists are already recording not just verbal altercations or the notorious shouts of "go back to Ukraine", but actual cases of everyday violence, arson, and denial of employment based on nationality. The police are thankfully still containing these incidents, but I must say, social tensions are already higher than usual. Some Ukrainian figures, yes, I think out of fear, are starting to make statements about Germany in the 1930s. I think that's a purely emotional overreaction. And you could say that at this point, it's nonsense. Yes, Poland is still a member state of the EU. They have a strict legal system and it works. But the fact that the social climate for migrants has become cold and toxic, well, that's a fact. Friends, to sum up this story, what can we say? Our epilogue. We have a classic example of how foreign policy and historical memory become bargaining chips in the internal struggle for power. The Kiev elites, well, apparently believed in their own inviolability and absolute indispensability to the West. Like, we're fighting here on the front lines, nothing will happen to us, we'll do whatever we want. They overlooked it. Some may not have considered the tectonic changes building within Polish society. They sincerely believed that Warsaw would always turn a blind eye to any historical antics for the sake of strategic partnership. Polish politicians, both liberal and conservative, exploited this mistake. It's unclear if people in Kiev overlooked this or assumed there had been no consequences. The opposition is cashing in on public frustration for electoral gains. The Tusk government, trying to save their seats, is also forced to take an ultimatum stance. And in the end, the winners are the political strategists who were hoping to win those coveted seats in the Sejm. And as always, it's ordinary people who lose out, because now they have to live side by side in this atmosphere of mutual distrust and everyday hostility. That's the harsh reality, my friends. Let's see, with the elections coming up in a year, I can tell you this year is going to be a heated one. And if peace, in short, if the left loses, well, then we'll see what kind of coalition there will be. Well, sort of, you're in trouble, dear Ukrainians. So I'm not telling anyone to panic. You just need to understand the risks. I think you guys are adults, you're watching me, you already know what you need to talk to your kids about and how to, let's say, reduce the risks of getting into unpleasant situations yourselves. Well, first of all, don't shout loudly in Russian or in Ukrainian. Well, watch carefully, keep your eyes and ears open. It's easier for me because I have big ears. And remember to care for yourself and your loved ones. What else did I want to say? All right, friends, and think about it. Maybe it's worth looking for, considering a backup plan. If things go badly, make sure you have a plan. And of course, have an emergency fund. Yes, it will never hurt to have one. Roughly like 5 to 10, better yet 10 to 15,000 euros. So that if and when you move to another country, I don't know, like Hungary, Spain, it doesn't matter much. Just ensure you have enough money for the first 6 months while you settle in and adjust. That's my advice. I hope that everything will go well for you in Poland. So that's all for now. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Big shout out to the working class. Turners, carpenters, machinists, welders, etc. If I missed your job, mention it in the comments. See you next time. Bye.